Welcome to The Debate. Our focus today comes from these transcripts, quite revealing ones actually, from a pull-aside meeting. This was between the former U.S. president and the president of France. Now, they covered a lot of ground, Ukraine, obviously, but a major point of, let's say, friction emerged around the Middle East, specifically the situation in Gaza. So we're going to be digging into a key disagreement there. The strategic wisdom and maybe even more importantly, the timing of recognizing Palestine as an independent state, especially while this conflict is still very much ongoing. The central question really is this: does doing that now, recognizing Palestine, does it reward aggression, undermine security efforts, maybe compromise crucial leverage? And importantly, does it dishonor the victims of the October 7th attacks? I'll be arguing that yes, immediate recognition is strategically problematic, potentially risky, and it really needs to come after we achieve key security and humanitarian goals. It's about sequencing and leverage.
And I'll be taking the opposite stance. My argument is that recognition isn't just some future goal. It's actually a necessary part right now of the stabilization process itself. The evidence that's discussed in the transcripts, it suggests the current military-only strategy, well, it's just not achieving its stated aims long term. So bringing in a political perspective, including recognition, it's not a side issue. It's structurally essential if we want stability, if we want a workable day after in Gaza.
Okay, I can see why you'd focus on let's say, the frustration with how things are going militarily. But let me frame this slightly differently, focusing on the strategic timing and, frankly, the moral clarity needed here. The source material itself makes it pretty clear that the absolute top priority, the non-negotiable, has to be getting all the hostages released and finding a responsible way to end the fighting. Introducing recognition right now, well, as the dialogue itself captures, it carries a huge risk of essentially honoring Hamas, giving them a massive diplomatic victory while the region is still, processing the sheer horror of October 7th. And we can't just gloss over that day. It was, as described, one of the most savage acts of terror in modern history. The memory of those victims, the calls for justice, the intense pressure to get every single captive back, both the living and, sadly, the deceased, that demands laser focus.
Our diplomatic energy, our leverage, it has to be entirely aimed at securing the immediate return of all hostages. Not some drawn-out process, ones and twos dribbling out over months, maybe years. Recognition is a powerful card to play, a major diplomatic asset. If we give it away now, prematurely, we forfeit that leverage. We basically inject, perverse incentives right when we need maximum focus on the immediate humanitarian and security needs.
That's certainly a powerful way to put it, focusing on the moral side and the leverage. And let me be absolutely clear, nobody forgets October 7th. The horror of those attacks, the profound suffering, including, as the transcript notes, for French citizens, that's the backdrop for everything. It has to be. But my argument really stems from the effectiveness of the policy itself. We have to look beyond perhaps the immediate understandable desire for retribution and ask, is the current strategy working strategically? The French president in that conversation highlighted something crucial. Despite real military successes like taking out top Hamas leaders, which he called a great achievement, right? The hard reality on the ground seems to be, and this is the quote, you have as many Hamas fighters as you had the first day. Now, that's a critical assessment.
If the military effort, after all this time and investment, isn't actually reducing the number of fighters, then the core strategy, dismantling the threat through attrition, it appears to be failing. We can't just, wait forever for a military result that might not come. So the focus really has to shift now towards a strategic political perspective. Recognition isn't just a symbolic gesture. It's presented as a necessary part of a full-fledged process. It's about creating that political framework that's absolutely essential for stabilizing Gaza, for what happens the day after. And this isn't just, theoretical talk. The fact that I think it was 11 countries had recently recognized Palestine, that shows a significant shift in international thinking. It suggests a growing consensus that military pressure alone, it just isn't enough to fix the underlying structural problem. This wasn't, as a transcript says, a decision taken like that. It was a calculated strategic move intended to create a political path forward. I'm sorry, but I struggle with the idea that just continuing the same military approach is viable when the data, the assessment right there in the transcript suggests the threat level, numerically at least, isn't changing. If peace and stability in Gaza and really the whole region is the shared goal, how do we get there without these kinds of structural political steps? Recognition seems like a foundational piece, defining boundaries, enabling governance, mobilizing international support.
That's an interesting framing of the attrition challenge, though I might interpret that strategic difficulty differently. Maybe then static numbers don't mean abandon the leverage. Maybe they mean even more sustained pressure is required. But my core point really comes back to sequencing and leverage. These are the tools we have, maybe the only tools, to properly honor the victims and, crucially, secure the immediate return of those captives. We're facing an ongoing, acute humanitarian crisis. The transcripts mention, around 20 living hostages still held, and perhaps 38 bodies? For the families of those killed, getting their loved ones back for burial, that's just as urgent, just as vital as rescuing the living. If we muddy the waters now by bringing in this incredibly complex, long-term political question of recognition, we dilute the focused, diplomatic pressure that's needed right now for this immediate, humane outcome.
Why would we give away our strongest diplomatic card, recognition, before we've secured these absolute, immediate, morally essential needs? To say recognition is needed now for stability, it feels like it ignores the primary source of leverage we currently hold. If recognition is granted, what significant diplomatic tool is left to compel the immediate release of everyone? The focus has got to remain absolutely sharp. Security first, honoring the victims, and then we can talk about the complex political architecture.
You keep coming back to leverage, and it's a fair point, that you seem to frame recognition only as a concession, a reward. What if it's also an active tool for stabilization? Let's push on this efficacy question you raised. You suggest maybe more military pressure is needed, but the evidence presented in the discussion is that the current pressure doesn't work to dismantle the Hamas. If that assessment holds, what's the strategic rationale for just doing more of the same? Look, structural stability in Gaza, that whole day after scenario, it requires some kind of viable non-Hamas political entity to step in, right? How do you empower that alternative, that moderate body, if you don't offer the basic scaffolding of international recognition, if you don't define a political horizon? Recognition is the signal. It's what potentially unlocks security partnerships, economic aid, and critically, it offers the Palestinian people a tangible, nonviolent political pathway. That inherently undermines Hamas's narrative. If stability is genuinely the common goal, we have to start building the structures that enable it. And recognition seems like a cornerstone.
And that, I think, brings us right to the heart of the strategic disagreement. The real-world implications of granting recognition now. It's not just about the moral dimension, but the strategic cost, the forfeiture of leverage. I have to stand by the position that granting recognition at this specific moment, while the perpetrators of October 7th are still active, still holding hostages, it fundamentally weakens our hand for negotiating future essential security guarantees. Recognition as a final, powerful diplomatic act, surely it should be offered in exchange for concrete things. Ironclad security arrangements, verified demilitarization steps, a clear, unequivocal commitment to peaceful coexistence. If we give that away up front, what mechanism forces compliance later? How do we ensure a newly recognized state actually becomes a secure neighbor? It just seems logical that this has to be sequenced after security is demonstrably established. It should be a reward for verified progress, not an opening bid made under duress.
You're right to demand strong security guarantees, absolutely. But arguing for that kind of sequential purity, well, based on the evidence we're discussing, it feels like it just delays any resolution indefinitely. We need to be careful to distinguish between, as you put it, honoring Hamas and creating a political perspective that actually works to marginalize them in the long run. The move by those 11 nations, it wasn't random. It was explicitly aimed at trying to break this cycle of violence that military action alone clearly hasn't been able to stop. To get that secure environment you're seeking, we have to define who's in charge, what the borders are, what the political authority is for Gaza, ideally as soon as a ceasefire takes hold. If we wait for some theoretical perfect security moment that might never arrive, instability just continues, doesn't it? And the situation likely gets worse. Recognition acts as that crucial political anchor for the whole stabilization process. It allows international aid mechanisms to function properly. It enables security assistance to non-Hamas forces. It lets economic aid flow tied to specific governance standards. Without recognition, who do international bodies even deal with? Who signs the agreements? Delaying recognition basically guarantees the failure of the day-after strategy before it even starts.
Which leads us right into that critical point about sequencing. We probably agree on the desired end state, right? Hostages released, a ceasefire in place, humanitarian aid flowing, and then, eventually, yes, a defined political perspective, stabilization. My position remains firm. The first three, hostages, ceasefire, aid, these have to come first. We need to use the unified international pressure that exists now to achieve those. Recognition is the final piece, the capstone, if you will. It feels like backward statecraft to give away your most valuable diplomatic chip before the game has really played out. Recognition should follow a successful resolution, acting as an incentive for ongoing compliance, enabling a peace that's actually earned and sustainable, not just declared under pressure. We have to get those captives back now, all of them, not in a slow trickle over 2 years. And that requires holding on to our leverage.
I agree with the sequence you laid out. Hostages first, then ceasefire, then aid, and then stabilization for Gaza. Absolutely. But where we differ is when the political piece comes in. I maintain that the political perspective, including recognition, is fundamentally required to even begin the stabilization phase effectively. Think about it. If you just stabilize the land, pour in aid, set up security, but you don't simultaneously define a recognized, viable political future, you create a power vacuum. And who thrives in a vacuum? Groups like Hamas. So, the political horizon, which includes recognition, it can't just be tacked on at the very end. It needs to be developed alongside the ceasefire and aid planning. It creates the framework for the day after before the guns fall silent. If you delay the political track, you delay establishing credible non-Hamas governance, which means you delay actual resolution and stabilization, potentially forever.
Drawing between stabilization and political definition. I do. But I'm still not convinced that we need to sacrifice our most immediate, critical leverage to chase a theoretical future stability. The absolute priority right now isn't designing post-conflict governance charts. It's getting people home safely and ending the fighting in a way that acknowledges the profound trauma of October 7th. Giving away the prize of recognition prematurely feels like it removes the pressure needed for a full, immediate return of those captives, and yes, risks validating the very environment that led to such brutality. The timing matters immensely, and for this specific diplomatic step now just doesn't seem like the right time. I think our discussion really highlights this deep tension, doesn't it, between securing immediate morally vital outcomes and pushing for longer-term strategic change.
I still believe quite strongly that granting recognition to Palestine right now would strategically undermine our leverage and could easily be seen as rewarding the circumstances that led to October 7th. We have to keep the pressure on, diplomatic pressure, to get all the hostages out and end this conflict responsibly before we take that final significant step.
And I would reiterate my perspective that the strategic evidence presented, the static fighter numbers, the apparent limits of a purely military approach, it really demands we shift tactics now. Recognition isn't just some future reward. It's a vital political tool. It's required not just for a lasting resolution, but for creating the credible political alternative that is absolutely essential for stabilization itself. Without providing that political horizon, Gaza seems doomed to fall back into conflict, no matter how firm our immediate moral stance might be.
We certainly both share the ultimate goal, achieving peace, ending these horrific wars, both in Gaza and elsewhere. But, as we've discussed today, getting there involves navigating these fundamentally different expert views on how best to sequence actions and use diplomatic tools when the pressure is this intense.
Indeed, it's incredibly complex, forcing this difficult balance between moral imperatives,
strategic leverage, and the structural needs for any kind of genuine long-term stability in the region. Leaves a lot to consider.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more video podcasts like this.